Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Stuart Brown. I'm going to be hosting this session. I'm a lead sales engineer here at Adarma. I'm joined by a panel of contributors who all have a lot of domain experience in the world of Security Operations Center. So Graham Curtis is our Director of Internal Engineering, responsible for all our product and service development, held leadership positions at some high-profile banking customers. Joined also by Tim Davis and Alison Brogan, our two professional services practice leads. Both have a lot of experience in the more strategic and the design, if you like, of security operations centers. And we're joined by Rob Farnard from Splunk. He's a security specialist. And finally, by Paul Burtonshaw. He's a sales engineer who's heavily involved in all of our managed service opportunities and has held management positions in as SIEM manager and as change control manager. So again, everyone with domain expertise and contributing to this topic today. Just very quickly, for those of you who don't know who Adarma is, we're a specialist in all areas of threat management, including threat modeling, threat intelligence, and risk-based vulnerability management. I guess our core functions of MDR and increasingly extending the use of automation within our own SOC and helping our customers do this. Having use case assessments and other advisory services, and really helping our customers with a safe transition to cloud, embedding security controls along the way, and finally, strategic consulting services across the threat management landscape. This webinar actually came about from a Gartner report selecting the right SOC model for your organization. It was published in February 2020, earlier this year, and we produced a white paper with our own thoughts from that. I guess some of the key highlights were security operations centers would fail in their mission without a clear target operating model, and if their deliverables were not tightly coupled to business use cases, risks, and outcomes. And hopefully we'll touch on that theme as we go through today. We also said a hybrid SOC, working with external providers, is a credible option that's increasingly been adopted by many organizations, specifically in the enterprise space. And the third highlight was building, implementing, running, and sustaining a fully staffed 24/7 SOC is cost prohibitive for most organizations. So we're going to go through as a discussion with all the contributors on this and look at these models in a little bit more detail. I'll start off with the virtual SOC because it's not really a focus for a typical Adarma client, one that's assessed that they don't actually need a 24-hour SOC. Generally, it's something that is put together like in a war room situation where there's an incident. I guess our advice for people who are in this space is focus on log collection, focus on getting visibility across your firewall, your antivirus, proxy, operating system logs, and authentication. And you know, you do well to leverage Splunk's out-of-the-box security use cases and get you some very quick value and get you up and running very quickly. Moving on to the multifunction SOC, Gartner noted a renewed interest in this from companies merging both NOC and SOC. It tends to be relatively low maturity customers who are looking to kind of leverage the economies of scale. Having a 24/7 NOC and a 24/7 SOC as well. And then looking to integrate things like incident triage, ticketing, and workflow, and share common asset information. Typically, this is customers who are like heavily into infrastructure. So looking at a lot of operational technology or industrial control systems, or heavy into the Internet of Things space. One of our customers is a banking customer and have a very complex infrastructure. They have something called an enterprise command center. And this is a room with about 40 or 50 people in it, and a massive bank of screens. And they really model the whole business. They show how transactions and processes are performing. They get all their network alerts, and the SOC is actually residing in this location too. So that actually across this screen, across these screens, they can actually see what's happening in real time across the business. And then they can be, in terms of like the incident triage, be talking with the SOC team and finding out with some common triage about what's actually happening and what's going wrong. I'm going to talk about the hybrid SOC model now, and just to recap Gartner's comments that the hybrid SOC was a credible option that's increasingly been adopted, and I think that's certainly our experience, Paul, isn't it? I mean, I can't think of a project that didn't contain an element of hybrid recently. Can you?
No, I think it's fair to say in terms of SOC services and in terms of where we're seeing a shift in emphasis, it's definitely in the area of hybrid SOC. So really from my experience, traditionally going back many years now, traditional SOC services were very much a compliance exercise to some degree, offering fairly basic standard operational based response. Obviously, things have changed within the world. The threat landscape has changed quite considerably, and of course, now organisations need to do a whole lot more in terms of what they do from a detection point of view, and then, of course, they're on after a response. We, as Adarma, for anyone who's on the call who's not had chance to grab our white paper, there is in fact an Adarma white paper on this topic, which is worth a read. And really within that, and Adarma's view is that there are sort of three different distinct variations of what a hybrid SOC is. So of course we consider service hours perspective. So one variation is service hours, and I guess that could be somewhat simplistically an organization is really looking for out of hours coverage from a 24/7 perspective, and don't want to go through the process of organizing shifts and paying for the expense of that and finding staff to do that. Another variation, and the one that I guess we're going to focus on most in the next couple of minutes, is the specialist services. And really by specialist services, this really becomes the area of real intent on the part of the client, whereby the client is very keen ultimately to not just augment their team, but to also augment their team with advanced SOC capability and advanced SOC skills.
I think you've got an example of this to show us in a sec, don't you?
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we do.
Okay.
So I will cover that in a little while.
Okay.
So the final one is the transitional variation, and really that's a combination of, I guess, the first two, whereby an organization is transitioning from one model to another. So, Stuart, shall I carry on with the hybrid SOC? What you can see in the slide is how we believe and how we operate a hybrid SOC. Now, I guess the important thing to also note here is not all providers will offer a hybrid SOC option. In fact, many organizations will offer only one sort of standard variation of SOC from an MSSP perspective. It's more rather the specialist SOC providers who will sort of go to the depths of what we will do, for example, within Adarma. So really, in the case of the hybrid SOC and in the case of the diagram that's shown on the screen, ultimately what we will be doing is applying additional SOC resources and augmenting the existing client security team in alignment with the more traditional remote MSS SOC. Now, when I say we've seen a shift in emphasis, excuse me, is really 18 months, 2 years. We've seen a real shift in terms of organizations wanting to do a whole lot more with their SIM. So basically, organizations, whilst are happy and comfortable with the services MSSPs provide, like Adarma, for example, they want further assurance that more is being done. And I guess each of us have a different view, I guess, in terms of what that actually means. To me, it's more about proactiveness. It's about an organization wanting to be on the front foot and really looking to the MSSP to offer just a little bit more than what is provided from a sort of more multi-tenant perspective. The clients and organizations I'm working with at the moment and organizations I've worked with in the past, clients that is, generally are keen to focus on L3 services such as threat hunting and use case development. More recently, things have moved slightly again, still in the area of use cases, but ultimately organizations now are very keen to ensure that from a use case point of view, that they're being a little more strategic, a little bit more tactical and targeted in terms of their use case deployment and ensuring that the use cases do in fact answer all the various tactics that can be used by an attacker. So I guess what I'm referring to is the MITRE ATT&CK framework. And again, we as Adarma are seeing a big shift in organizations wanting assurance and clarity that not only are their SIMs offering them security monitoring, but giving them security monitoring that's of real value to that particular organization, and that threats directly associated with their organization are being monitored, detected, and of course resolved.
Great.
In terms of, sorry, Stu.
No, go on. Sorry, I thought that pause was like you'd finished. So no, carry on.
That pause was me coughing because for some reason, as is always the case, when I do one of these types of things or presentation, I've got a frog in my throat all of a sudden. But anyway, no, I was really just at the point of sort of finishing up. Really, ultimately, clients want more from their SIMs. In order to give them more from their SIMs, yes, they still need 24/7 coverage. Yes, they still need the assurance of an MSSP. However, customers now are beginning to realize that there's a whole lot more that can be done with a SIM, and therefore they need additional dedicated assurance and assistance to help develop their own teams, give them more control, and guarantee that development and enhancement. So that's a little bit from me around hybrid SOC.
Thank you, Paul. Really, really useful insight. So thanks for that. Graham, I'll turn to you now. I mean, you've been instrumental in some of the largest and most SOCs in the country, I guess. So why do companies need this model? Could you take us through that?
Sure. Instrumental. Nice of you to say so, Stuart. Yes. over the past 15 years or so, I've been involved with the setup and running of a fair number of dedicated SOCs. Usually the drivers behind an organization determining that it wants a dedicated SOC are, one, they've grown their security monitoring services in-house, organically bolting add-on functions together, and they recognize that off-the-shelf security operations centers don't really offer the bespoke service that they need. Perhaps more frequently, though, is driver two, which is that organizations are looking for more control over the running and change, especially change, of the SOC processes and technology. Organizations that need this level of control tend to be ones with large and mature internal security teams who appreciate that change to their own internal controls and systems needs to be rapidly mapped to the detection and response capabilities within the SOC. In other words, there's an appreciation that a proper functioning SOC can't simply concentrate on the external threat landscape in the fashion of many MSSP SOCs. They tend to make a song and dance about things like attribution of attacks to threat agent groups. Don't get me wrong, these are important things, and some MSSPs do this task exceptionally well. But in my opinion, and I guess I'm echoing what some of our largest customers have told me, it's important to be threat-led, but it's critical to know your own systems and postures far better than the attacker. A third driver related to the previous one is that often CISOs, who've previously outsourced their SOCs, even to some of the largest systems integrators, will be reluctant to choose anything but a dedicated SOC due to the perception that they've been trapped in, dare I say, the expense and bureaucracy of change management hell whenever they've looked to make even a simple alteration to their monitored systems or rule base.
Right, so you mentioned banking there a few times, Graham, but the dedicated SOC model then, does that tend to be industry specific then?
Yeah, it's a good question, Stuart. So I guess who do I think is the target audience for dedicated SOCs? Well, the organizations that I've seen most often use such a model are usually highly regulated and frequently attacked. They recognize that responding rapidly to both attacks and regulators' demands is of critical importance. Typically, I've seen the appropriate level of maturity and regulation within not only, as you've mentioned, large financial organizations, but also defense contractors, government departments, critical national infrastructure providers, and the like. As you can imagine, each of these verticals has its own unique challenges to address. I guess overall, the ability to be masters of their own security journey is a powerful force in the choosing of a SOC model. And those with such requirements as I've described need to have both deep pockets, as skilled 24/7 SOC is expensive, but also it's hard to run and maintain just due to the skill shortage that we see in this country. It's real, and demand is I guess, at an all-time high. So there's some serious things to think about when you're choosing a dedicated SOC in cost and maintenance.
That's great. Thank you, Graham. Very much appreciated. I'm going to turn now to Tim. Command SOC is actually one of the ones that I wasn't that familiar with. Maybe you could talk around that and what kind of typical scenarios, Tim, have you seen this used in? Because I know you've been involved in the design of lots of these.
Yeah, sure, Stuart. So just I think to reiterate really, what is a command SOC? It's really a SOC that provides control over other SOCs, and it's sort of doing that from a perspective of the more specialist type of areas, such as in threat intelligence or organizational intelligence, and looking at the kind of priority one sort of critical incident kind of response. So it tends to avoid those sort of normal tier 1, tier 2 kind of day-to-day operational sort of tasks. So it gives a more layered approach to multiple SOCs. And we tend to sort of typically see this used by the more larger organizations global organizations and government agencies and departments, they tend to be the ones that have got this more need for a command SOC. But saying that, it can be used for any kind of organization, where there's a need to separate out SOC instances. And that can be for a variety of reasons that we've seen, really. One is mergers and acquisitions, needing to keep that separate legal, separate organizational element to systems and to the SOC environments themselves. Where organizations have got shared services, this typically we've seen these in government departments, and again, they need to provide that command SOC over those shared services. The security industry itself, in managed security services providers, will have a need as well. And we've even seen it in one or two cases where customers have either brought a new product or a new service to the market, and either through customer contractual requirements or through just risk management, they want to keep the SOC managing that new product, that new environment, separate from their existing SOC environments. So lots of sort of scenarios there. Benefits that customers have been finding really from a command SOC, I think, Stuart, are that it enables them to have oversight across maybe a disparate organization. Again, we've seen this in global organizations where the group HQ has wanted to have some oversight, but at the same respect doesn't want to take on that full kind of tier 1, tier 2 kind of capability. We've also seen it, and customers have got benefits from needing to keep operational independence, be that because of certain in-country kind of regulation and legislation, or data legislation, or just general a kind of separation around the operating environments across a global organization. Other benefits as well have been that there's now a central intelligence gathering and dissemination function, which is something that obviously benefits the other sort of elements of the organization, receiving that more wider set of intelligence feeds that the sort of central function can provide across the organization. And also being able to centralize forensic and critical sort of incident response, maybe where you've got skill shortages in certain regional areas that could then be replaced using a central function. So again, lots of benefits there for customers. And I think just leaving one last point there, that we've seen one major challenge with command SOCs is that you've got to get the balance between the amount of data which the next layer down SOCs send up to the central command SOC. If you get that balance wrong, it can become very expensive in terms of that data transfer between the two organizations. Again, quite often maybe across regional boundaries as well. So I hope that's giving you a bit of an overview on that command SOC side.
Excellent. Yeah, no, thank you. I actually learned something from that myself. So yeah, appreciate that, Tim. I'm going to turn now to Rob from Splunk, and Rob, maybe you could. And by the way, Rob, we're doing okay for time, so please, right. Don't feel you have to rush this section, but just maybe you could give us some insight into, from a kind of Splunk or technology perspective, really, what needs to underpin the SOC.
Absolutely. Look, so far we've touched on obviously a number of different models, and the kind of third wheel of that triangle of process and people is the technology to support that underlying model. And actually, if you just flick back a slide, I'll just touch on some of the technology implications of those models. We've talked a lot about those different models, and there is even some cases where a command SOC could also be a hybrid SOC, right? So they're not actually even exclusively independent of each other. But let's take a command SOC as an example. You've got multiple SIEMs, potentially, multiple organizations or departments or business lines that have their own SOC, and you want an overarching SOC, then you need to have the technology that enables the workflow to provide that capability as seamlessly and as efficient as possible. You need to be able to escalate a ticket to the global command SOC, and the command SOC probably wants the ability to be able to search across those multiple individual SOCs. So technology could be a huge enabler in that example. Again, when you have the hybrid SOC function, or even a dedicated SOC function, often the life cycle of a security incident or a security alert, from the raw data to initial triage to deep dive investigation, to threat hunting, picking up and finding something of interest that needs incident response. That life cycle of a ticket goes through multiple groups and people, especially in a hybrid SOC. So again, you can use technology to rely on that and make that as seamless and easy as possible. How do we send a ticket from one person, one team, or one group to another? How does that mechanism work? And just that idea of whichever SOC model you have, you need to work and think about the technology enabling that workflow and model as much as possible. So if you skip on a couple of slides, past this one. So yes, there's the workflow. There is the model of how you interoperate between the different groups of people and skills. And then, once you've started to think about that people and process, I've talked about this first box really, which is the technology enables that people and process. So how easy and quick is it to develop use cases? How easy and quick is it to build automation? And how easy and quick is it to escalate an alert or pass an incident to someone else? So that is what the technology will define. And the other aspect is, where are you as a business? What do you care about? What are your key risks? What is your maturity today? What is the maturity where you want to be? And based on those factors, it's not just the right technology for the workflow, but it's the capabilities, the underlying capabilities. So, for any SOC is traditionally based around, the technology category of what we call SIEM, security, incident and event management. SOAR is another category, which is orchestration and automation, which is, really risen to the fore of recent times to build automation in as a core principle of your operational SOC model. So as you build new use cases, you think about the investigation process and you build automation into that to make sure those resources you have, again, whether they are managed service, whether they are internal resources, they are focused on the higher value, the specialist tasks. So choosing the right technology for the maturity level you're at, and being able to scale into the right technologies as you mature is really important. As you do advance and if you do choose the right technologies, then that people and process element being slicker and faster means, as I said before, the resource that you do have can focus on the things that actually do start to improve your maturity, and they do start to reduce risk to the business rather than firefighting every day. So you're focusing your resource on activities like building new use cases, proactive threat hunting, building and improving automation workflows, because those are the things that ultimately allow you to mature. And if you do those, then you're more likely to detect an attack earlier in its kill chain. You're more likely to be able to respond faster. So, you'll pick that ticket up quicker and you'll respond faster. And all of those things ultimately mean you're reducing the risk of the business being attacked being breached or successfully attacked. You're reducing the risk of IP theft, service downtime, compliance breaches, all of the things a business cares about. And a good example of that, if you skip slide, please, would be, everybody's on the journey to cloud or digital transformation, and 99%, apart from some very specific government sectors, but even in government these days, are moving to the cloud. And with cloud for security brings new challenges, again, almost independent of the model you choose. The technology that underpins that model is important, because moving to the cloud is a challenge. It brings new threats, new attack surfaces like microservices if you are developing fully cloud native applications, or if you're lifting and shifting applications to your cloud service provider, or using platform as a service, then new attack surfaces exposed. So what you need to be as a SOC and as a security team, you want to be enabling that journey as easily as possible. And again, this is where the technology can come into play to make that as easy as possible. So if you skip slide again, please.
Sure.
So you've chosen your model, you know where you are from a risk perspective, you know where your focus is on, but then how can technology give me a kind of an uplift, a foot in the door, a leap in capability by giving you out-of-the-box integration with, for example, in this example, if you are in a big move to cloud, then you want to be able to get those different data sources in easy. You need a technology that understands different cloud service providers, is flexible in the types of data it can bring in, and allow you to both detect and respond into all of those environments. And to touch on Splunk, that's where Splunk really excels, to be that data platform that sits in between any data source that you're interested in, apply any of those models that we talked about, and be able to grow and mature your SOC to deliver all of the capabilities you need. And it's giving you out-of-the-box functionality in the instance of cloud, to understand the types of threats that might be targeted on those new threat vectors exposed by cloud, to give you a leaping capability. So you use the out-of-the-box functionality from the technology, shape that and utilize that, and get the most value out of it with your chosen SOC model. Cool.
Fantastic.
Thanks.
Thank you, Rob. Much appreciated. And so moving on, like as Rob said, you've decided you need a SOC, probably through one of these drivers. You've had an audit point, you've had an external review or internal review or internal risk assessment, or indeed you've had a security breach, or indeed you have a SOC already and you're looking to enhance the maturity of it. So I'll put this graphic together to try and map in these SOC models to number one, at the top here, an assessment of your current maturity rating. So for us, we base this on NIST and tier 1 to 4 maturity, which is really based on your ability to, or your capability to identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. So the first thing is an assessment of your current maturity, and then your target operating model. That should define the level of sophistication in terms of people, process, and technology, the SOC functions required in terms of the managed detection and response, and threat intelligence, and threat modeling and threat hunting, along with the incident response functions and your vulnerability management. And so looking at combining that, the target operating model complexity or requirements, mapping that into your current maturity should help in determining which SOC model is appropriate. And I think what I tried to show here is the dedicated SOC and the command SOC require very high levels of maturity, and indeed you need, by their nature, as Tim was describing, the multifunction SOC, there's a lot of complexity and process to be worked on. And I guess for us, the hybrid model really spans really the complexity and helps you flex. So it has the hybrid model itself has got the widest, if you like, I don't want to say capability again, but the widest scope to be able to address your requirements. and also to provide, so, you know, even if you decide that, you know, you really have a high complexity target operating model and you're not that mature, and then I think as Paul described, you could use the hybrid model as a stepping stone and as a transition. So many of our customers ultimately want to get to a dedicated SOC, and they use the hybrid SOC model as a transition over a number of years. But what happens if your target operating model is yet to be fully defined? So, Alison, if a client hasn't got their target operating model in place, just give us a feel. How do you actually go about building this from scratch?
Sure. So I guess like Rob said earlier, I'm quite passionate about how it's important to consider the three core components of people, process, and technology when you're trying to determine the target maturity of any service. So it's obviously different for every organisation when it comes to your SOC. So some, I guess, key points that I think you'd want to consider are what are the services you need your SOC to provide? In what order do you think that those should be functioning? And then on the back of that, have a think about your processes and what you would need to successfully operate and report on those services. And then also, I guess, related back to what we've been talking about, you know, what SOC model best suits your organisation, and therefore who are you going to need to operate that SOC service for you that you've defined as part of your TOM. And finally, tying back into what Rob was talking around, like the technology aspect of it. So what technology needs to be installed, integrated and configured, and to what level in order to run the services that you've defined. So that could be your SIEM, it could be a security case management solution, it could be SOAR, or various other types of technology that you utilize within your SOC service. Mm-hmm. Within Adarma, we've created something that we call the SOC toolkit, which I've basically included some extracts of on this slide here for people to see. It's a set of proprietary artifacts that we've created, so an approach framework, detailed service offerings, knowledge base, templates, that allow us to structure and accelerate our approach to delivery and operation of SOC services. It's been created based on our experience within Adarma and out with, and industry best practice. And we use it throughout our SOC engagements. And it's our approach that we use to build a SOC from scratch or help enhance a SOC. And it follows the key phases that you can see here on the screen. So assessment, direction, plan, architecture and design, implement and enhance. So we'd start off with, well, I mean, it depends on the customer, obviously. Some customers ask us to help with the approach as a whole, and some it's just different aspects of it that they need some assistance with. But if you were to look at the approach from end to end, then it starts off with assessment and direction, which is like a series of workshops with SMEs to understand a customer's requirements, their current state, and help of what their SOC strategy needs to look like. And then on the back of that, you would look to do an element of planning, so creating a series of documents to articulate a phased approach to deliver the target state under appropriate governance. Your target state could be a 5-year plan, and therefore we look at this phased approach to help you get there over a period of time. Then you've got architecture and design, so that's when we bring in our delivery teams to work with the customer to design the components within the strategy, and then look to implement them. So build them out, working to populate or customize a suite of processes, deliver the required technology from scratch or the changes that are required to existing technology, and training up allocated resources, whether it's within the customer themselves or within the third parties. So I guess just to focus in more on assessment direction, because that's, I guess, kind of where your question was, and to help answer that, some of the points that we've been discussing above around the considerations that you want to make when defining the target operating model. In addition to what I've said before, I think things around legal regulatory requirements, associated risks and audit findings, I know we've kind of mentioned them already, are important to consider when you're thinking about your SOC strategy. And I guess I just re-emphasize the importance of considering your business objectives and your known threats, which again I know a couple of people have covered off, but is so important when you're thinking about what that needs to look like.
Okay. Thank you, Alison.
No worries.
So I am going to stop sharing my screen now, and I'm going to ask everyone if there's any questions. I've got one here from which says, so where would a fully managed SOC fit that isn't in-house, like the SOC services provided by the likes of IBM, Wipro, etc.? So where would a fully managed SOC fit that isn't in-house?
I think there, Stuart, you've got a lot of obviously unknowns in terms of what the scope of that SOC service is.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure what you're thinking is, but it probably looks like it's in the hybrid SOC model, I would suggest.
I think there's been an update to that question from, I think, Anthony, and he's referring to the diagram from a little earlier. So I guess in answer to your question, the SOC would be a centralized remote SOC. So in the diagram that was shown earlier, there would be essentially two elements to that SOC in the case of a hybrid model. There would be a remote SOC, which would be manned and staffed by the MSSP, as in Adarma potentially. And then in terms of the other component of it, I guess you could refer to that as the incident response element of that security monitoring operation. And that would be staffed and manned ultimately by the client, with assistance if required via dedicated staff from the provider, again in this case MSS. Should that happen, essentially what's being created is a hybrid SOC.
Thank you, Paul. That's appreciated. Does that answer your question, Anthony?
Sorry, I was going to take that and then I realised I can actually speak on this. No, all it is I'm just pulling together a slide pack really to show to our execs and explaining the different types of SOC models. And I thought your first diagram was very good with the virtual SOC, hybrid SOC, dedicated SOC. But when we're speaking to the likes of your IBMs, your Wipros, your Airbus, who take the whole service and they manage it, I was just wondering where that fits in to here, because it didn't stand out. So I don't know about a hybrid SOC. I would say it's a dedicated SOC, but your dedicated SOC talks about full in-house 24/7 operations. So I kind of just cut and paste yours like for like. So.
I mean, I think that's related to there's a comment in one of the slides. It says in the hybrid model, someone can choose to fully outsource, and I go back actually to the Garner comments, Anthony, whereas an organization cannot buy an outsourced SOC. Outsourced services will still feed into an organization's own security operations, regardless of how informal that might be. At Adarma, we don't believe a full outsource works either. This, for us, is normally where a client wants a basic detection service, just almost like a tick the box or for some compliance reason. We actually passionately believe that, for it to be successful, it's got to be a true partnership, and a partnership really in terms of the functions like incident response, risk-based vulnerability management, the use case development and threat modeling, and in fact in just terms of managing detection and response for the kind of response elements. We've had Paul and I have had a number of sort of clients that just not just want to consume a service. They don't want to interact at all. In fact, had some customers just say, look, if you need to press the big red button and switch everything off, you should have the functionality to do that. And we don't think that kind of arm's length type of thing really works. So I guess that's one of the reasons why we don't talk about it that much.
No, I agree with you 100% there. I think it's just a language. When I hear hybrid SOC, I feel it's like the partnership you're talking about. I don't feel it's like where we hand over SOC services to somebody else to manage and then just throw the things back at us when there are incidents. But it's semantics. It's just different language that we use in different worlds, I guess.
Yeah.
I think the fully managed SOC idea concept from an external party is kind of a false terminology as well, depending on what Stuart said, because to really understand what your use cases are, what your risks are, what your environment is, I think someone else said it earlier, you need to have almost dedicated resource that understand the business and understand how you operate. So even in the example you said, you could have some remote services, but you need some dedicated resource, whether that is, supplied and filled by Adarma or another managed service party that are kind of almost full-time dedicated to your organization. And that could be internal staff, that could be outsourced staff. And the kind of fully managed SOC probably means is all of the people are kind of paid for by IBM, but they would have to be, or Adarma, but they have to be dedicated to you in some way, because there's no way to be successful without really understanding your environment. So they're effectively, the customers' staff to some extent, unless it's just really is a very low maturity tick box exercise SOC, which we're not seeing as much anymore, or people moving away. And it's like, we send some data there, it ticks a box, so we think we're secure.
The only place where it may make a certain amount of sense is where the entire IT function is shipped lock, stock and barrel to one of these systems integrators or IBMs, whoever it is. And even then, so I was working with a banking client that did this at one point, but they actually wanted to separate the SOC off from that, even though they were given a very compelling financial figure for having it performed by that SI. They wanted it separate so that company then didn't go and mark its own homework and cover up all the skeletons that they unearthed through their running of the service. So it is quite a difficult decision to make. And even when the finances possibly stack up in their favour, you have to be very careful when you choose that and determine whether it truly is dedicated to you.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Thank you. Yeah, and just for everyone else, happy to answer any more questions in the chat window, or you quite happy for you to come off mute and ask us, the panel, directly.
I have a question that's come in from prior to the event. It's Kate. It's okay. A fairly general question. In your view, what should a modern SOC look like in terms of functionality?
Modern. Well, I guess I'll start with that one. I think the cornerstone is obviously event monitoring, detection, investigation, and triage, the risk and response side. So instant response, including frequently now malware analysis and some forensic analysis tool. More in-depth threat intelligence and threat modeling for an organization so that they understand organizational risks as well as cyber risks, and threat hunting. Mentioned it a couple of times, but risk-based vulnerability management so that we can effectively prioritize things like patching, and control effectiveness. So including use case development, data onboarding, and obviously continuous improvement into the SOC technology stack. I know those are the first things I'd think of anyway.
Yeah, I think Stuart, that gets you to a reasonably good standard model at the moment. But I think SOCs should, if we talk about a modern SOC and our vision for where SOCs are going, maybe a little bit in this, they should now be starting to offer what I'm unoriginally going to title something like SOC as a service. Robert mentioned earlier the transition to cloud, the transition to digital working. So whatever SOCs are doing at the moment, they should be enabling DevOps and cloud teams to use SOC published APIs to self-enroll new systems and monitoring. We shouldn't try and fight these things and have a tortured workflow for enrolling new stuff into our SOC. So I would hope, I haven't seen many do it yet, but I would hope that SOCs of the future are going to start being more accommodating to new ways of working as well.
Right. Thanks, Graham.
Thank you.
I guess just to come to mind, obviously, modern SOC, we know we've started using automation heavily within our own SOC. So yeah, more advanced managed service providers, I guess, will start to adopt that that functionality too, to reduce the burden of routine, time-consuming tasks, and to aid contextualization and enrichment. So yeah, obviously, automation is one of the key things for a modern SOC.
Yeah, just to add that, Stuart, I definitely see that. Maybe 3-4 years ago, if we talked to automation, even again with some mature customers, and they would kind of be like, "Oh, we're not ready to automate yet. It's the last thing you do in the maturity, on the maturity journey." But actually, that's becoming much further down the chain in terms of that path, that roadmap, because it actually gives you time back earlier on in that maturity journey to then focus on that maturity journey, if you see what I mean. So actually automation is becoming in, you may have an organization that didn't have a SOC and they start to build a SOC and they start to build their first use cases. And as they build the processes around that, and they build, the run books that say this is what we do if we see this alert, then they're actually starting to say, well, maybe we can start automating from the beginning, right? That we can automate a lot of the response to those use cases, and that will free up my maybe minimal resource to focus on those other things that actually get me up that maturity journey faster.
Right. Thanks, Rob. Thanks.
Just to add as well, Stuart, to those comments as well, I think there's a couple of other things that I'm seeing as well, which is modern SOCs are tending to consolidate on multiple use cases now, bringing together the kind of cyber, the insider, the physical kind of, maybe what was in the past more siloed kind of detection response. So I think modern SOCs are bringing those together now, recognizing the common kind of approaches, processes, and ways of tackling those. And I think also modern SOCs are bridging that link with the wider IT organization and business much better as well. So more emphasis on greater integration with those other teams in order to make that risk kind of decision much more informed and quicker as well. So a couple of things there.
Excellent. Thank you, Tim. Well, we're almost there on the time. So I'd just like to number one, thank you all for attending and listening to us. We hope that provided some useful insight. I'd like to thank Graham and Tim and Alison and Paul and Rob for your contribution. And Kate, will there be a follow-up for some feedback? Because we always look to try and improve these events where we can.
Yeah, I was just going to say, actually, we'll ping you all a survey round as well, if you wouldn't mind just answering a couple of questions on what you thought of the content and the delivery of the content. But also, Stuart mentioned at the beginning that there was a paper that related to this, based on the Gartner paper, and it's Adarma's view on the various SOC models and the way that we introduce those to our customers. If you'd like to read that paper, I'd be happy to send it through. It is on the website, but if you drop me an email, I'm on the hello@adarma.com address, so you can reach me just by dropping me through a note there. I'll pop that in the chat as well.
Well, thank you all. I wish you a very good afternoon, and hopefully we'll speak to you again online soon. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks, bye.
You.